So I have this feeling that over the next couple of weeks, these podcasts are going to get shorter and shorter as I approach my due date. Hey guys, Sarah from the future here. I filmed my podcast yesterday, and I'm about to sit down to edit it today on Wednesday, but I just wanted to give a forewarning that I have a feeling that I might come across a little bit low energy and maybe even a bit spaced out. It's been a really long, and I know it's only halfway through the week, but it's been a really long week, and I haven't been sleeping the greatest, so it was kind of a struggle just to even get around to actually filming the podcast yesterday. So this is like a pre-forewarning apology, in case it is. I mean, I know it's not up to the usual standard, just right from the get-go, because I didn't even write notes before starting. But I didn't want to miss a week, and I didn't want to miss a chance to update you guys on how the knitting and the pregnancy have been going. So this is just a little forewarning and apology. So hopefully things are back to their usual level of quality and excitement next week. Hey there, fiber friends. I'm Sarah, and this is the Yarn Lab Canada podcast. This is season 1, Knitting for Twins, episode number 12, I think. And week 30. So I'm coming at you from the recently very overcast and cloudy Calgary, Alberta, where I will only be living for a short time longer. Once the boys arrive, I'm expecting twin boys the first week of June, and once they arrive, we'll be moving our family to Medicine Hat. Speaking of my twin boys, I did want to give you guys a little bit of an update on how things are going with that. So like I said, this is the week 30 podcast, but since I film on Tuesdays, I'm actually 30 weeks and 6 days today, so I'll be 31 weeks tomorrow, and as per sort of, current recommendations for best outcomes with twins, my OB has the plan that we're going to deliver my boys at 36 weeks, which means, crazily enough, in 5 weeks only, I'm going to be a mommy, and we're going to have a little family with 2 little boys here, which means for the podcast, hopefully there'll be maybe another 3 or 4 episodes between now and then. We'll play it by ear, and I will definitely keep people updated via Instagram, and you can find me on Instagram as at Yarn Lab Canada. In the event that things go a little bit earlier than planned and the podcast has to maybe stop or go on to hiatus a little bit sooner. But in the meantime, I've been doing lots of knitting, and let's dive right into it. Oh, and I did want to just take a second to thank all of my returning viewers. There is a growing community of you guys who have been tuning in each week with me, and I'm really grateful for that. And welcome any people who are new to the podcast or new to my YouTube channel, and I hope that you find something that sparks your interest here. Also, for my returning viewers, you may notice that I'm filming from my couch this week. Usually I film from my kitchen table. But to be honest, the rounder I get, the more in desire of having a more comfortable seat I am. So speaking of roundness, I'll show you that real quick. This is the nearly 31 week baby bump, although bump is an understatement, of course. But apart from just feeling very large and round and feeling quite a bit slowed down, everything's been really great. I couldn't be happier. So, like I said, let's get into the knitting. I only have one finished object for you guys this week, and that is a hat that I have been sharing on Instagram. And this is, or was, knit from my, the blue yarn was from the Knitting Expat yarn swap, and this yarn is by Indie Way Yarns, which says color inspired by nature. It's an independent dyer from Minnesota, and there is her information there. It's on the Principal DK base, which is Superwash Fine Merino, and the colorway is Waves of Superior. And since I grew up in Northern Ontario with Lake Superior in my background, I wanted to kind of knit a hat that was reminiscent of the landscape that I loved growing up. And the colorway brought to mind Tom Thomson. So Tom Thomson was a painter, famous Canadian painter, maybe in the 70s. I wouldn't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've done an art history class. But he sort of was the predecessor for the Group of Seven. They were painters from Southern Ontario who would go up into Northern Ontario, Lake Superior, Provincial Park, Algonquin Park, all along Northern Ontario, and they painted oil paintings of the landscape. And so this is inspired by some of his paintings of sort of lone pine trees, and I sort of sketched out a chart that I felt was inspired or reminiscent of his paintings, and then knit it into a little winter toque. Now, because the variegated blue is quite variegated, so you can see the large tree here, and then the chart goes around this way, and then it repeats on the other side. The dark gray color is Madeline Tosh DK in the Greco colorway. But yeah, so I'm mostly okay with the way that this hat turned out. It fits me pretty good. I might put a pom-pom on the top. But I think because in actuality there's not a lot of distinction between the gray color in the color work and some of the darker variegated bits in the variegated blue Waves of Superior colorway, it doesn't necessarily read the way I intended, but I'm still happy with the way it turned out. And I have leftover yarn to knit two little toques that I probably won't do any color work on. Just I'll do a dark gray band and then blue tops for the boys as well, so that we can be a little bit matchy-matchy. And I just knit that chart Fair Isle style so you can see all my carries on the inside. But yeah, so that's my only finished object. I will be entering this and the other two toques for the boys, which should be a quick knit later this week, in Mina from the Knitting Expat podcast, Expat Yarn Cal, which is sort of the intended destination for the yarns that were sent around in that swap. So that's my FO. I have been knitting quite voraciously this week, I guess, but I've been knitting a lot of the same piece. So last week I showed you that I was started on a new baby blanket for my local yarn shop, The Loop in Kensington here in Calgary. They do a monthly technique themed knit along, and this month's technique was short rows. So I'm knitting these short row pinwheel squares, and I need 6 for my blanket, and I finished 4. The 5th one is finished knit. I haven't joined the seam, but I left it so that I could show you the construction. So basically you cast on here and you work a green triangle with short rows, and then you pick up all of your short rows. Then you work a green triangle building the short rows again, and pick up, and you just sort of work your way around the pinwheel. The pattern is a free pattern, and I'll put the information in the description below, from Karen Simply Soft for, I think it's the Country Quilt baby blanket. Yeah, so I will put that information in the description below. And it's a really sort of fun way to knit two colors together to make an interesting square, because you wouldn't normally see that type of structure to a square. It's very different from a mitered square. Yeah. So I have 5 knit, and on the 6th one I am just about 3/4 of the way through, so the 6th square will be finished tonight, which is good because the blanket needs to be finished in order to be eligible to enter into the Cal by Saturday. And the yarn for that is Bernat Baby Soft, or Bernat Softy Baby, sorry, in the variegated Prince Pebbles colorway. And then Bernat Baby Softy Baby in the solid Soft Fern. And the Soft Fern actually matches the green in the variegated one, basically indistinguishably. And in order to knit 6 squares, you do definitely need 2 skeins of each, because after knitting the 5th square, this is all I had left of the first 2 skeins. And the fun thing about going to get these 2 skeins or balls or whatever you want to call it of yarn was that so normally Michaels and Walmart both carry Bernat Softy Baby, and so first I went by Michaels assuming that they have the bigger selection, and they were sold out of the Soft Fern, and they had swapped out in their inventory the Prince Pebbles for one that was more, I think, purple and blue as opposed to green and blue. So Michaels was no good, and I actually ended up walking out of there with no yarn, which very rarely, or I think I bought a paint pen that I need for another project, but walked out of Michaels with no yarn, which I very rarely actually do. Then I went to Walmart and picked up the Soft Fern, but they were sold out of the Prince Pebbles. So I went to a second Walmart where they had the Prince Pebbles but were sold out of the Soft Fern. So for pregnant Sarah, it was a very busy day and a lot of parking and walking just to get these 2 skeins of yarn to finish off that blanket. This blanket is actually not going to be, surprisingly enough, for my baby boys. It's going to go to my cousin, who is expecting a baby boy a month after me, but the blanket needs to be finished before my boys are born so that it can be sent back home to Ontario with my parents after they come to visit and see the babies. So this has been very close to monogamous knitting over the last couple of days because, like I said, that Cal deadline with April being over on Saturday. Speaking of knit-along deadlines, for my next project, I was knitting pretty aggressively on it, but then they extended the deadline all the way until May 30th, so I've been able to put it down for a while. But this here is my Cameo logo shawl. So this is the Cameo shawl pattern by Paulina P. And I am knitting it as part of the Cameo Loco Knit Along, which is being jointly hosted by Get Lit and Knit with Abby and Annie and Abby, I think. It's 2 A names that sound the same. And then with Devin on Francophie Knits. So they are jointly hosting the Cameo Local Knit Along, and the sort of goal of that knit along is to knit the Cameo shawl by Paulina P, and I'll link that pattern in the description below. It is a paid for pattern, and to do it using at least 1 skein of Hue Loco's yarn. So my skein of Hue Loco's yarn is this really beautiful speckled yarn that I've done the solid section and I striped it in to the next section. This is on her Phyllis sock base and the colorway is Glow Stick. And I will see if it's going to pick up, but it's kind of a little bit washed out. But so the reason for matching it with the other color that I'm using is Madeline Tasha's Edison bulb, is because the Glow Stick has little speckles of the Edison bulb color essentially throughout it. So I thought that they would look really fun together. So I have this much Edison bulb left to do the solid color B lace section, the 3rd section of this shawl. And I did have to play a little game of yarn chicken with my color A. and I almost made it to the end. The stripe section has 22 repeats, and I was able to do 21 before running out with a measly 2 meters of yarn left. The pattern did call for all 400, so I knew that it was going to be a tight fit, but I was really secretly hoping that I would have enough to put a square on my Cozy Memories blanket, and I unfortunately did not. So just 2 meters, and because I can't bring myself to throw out yarn, I kind of holding on to this, that maybe I'll use it to embroider something at some point. But Hue Local yarn, it doesn't have, for me, I didn't like the feel of it too much in my hand, but the fabric that it makes is fantastic. So yeah, it wasn't like the funnest, it wasn't bad to knit with, it felt, yeah, it wasn't like, the hand of it when you're knitting was not my favorite, but the fabric that it produces is amazing. And the couple times that I had this knitting project out in public, people commented on how beautiful the speckled yarn was. So absolutely gorgeous. It's working really great with the Edison bulb, and can't wait to knit the lace section. But since they have extended this cal deadline until May 30th, I'm just going to have this project on hold. Excuse me. I'm just going to have this project on hold until I finish off my baby blanket for the short row cal that I'm doing. And then finally, the third thing that I have been knitting on this week is more Hue Local yarn. And this is, the pattern is by Tin Can Knits. This is the Playdate cardigan. And you can see it's got tiny, adorable little old man pockets. And I knit both the sleeves this week. So it just needs the, like the trim and the button band, and then ends weaving in and blocking, and cardigan number 1 will be done. This is knit on Hue Loco's tweed sock base in the mineral colorway. I have a second skein in her mint colorway to do a second grandpa cardigan for baby number 2. So that's really it for knitting for me this week. I still do want to do a separate video to show off my stash haul from the Fiber Shindig, which was a fiber festival that was held in Calgary, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. The reason I haven't filmed that video yet is because, as Candace has mentioned, Candace from the Pin Feathers and Pearls podcast, and she also films from here in Calgary. She mentioned on her last video that it's been really overcast and gloomy for basically the last week in Calgary. Which, yes, the sunshine's happy, but I've been such a hot flash pregnant lady that I've been appreciating this sort of very cooler turn of weather. But with the really overcast days that we've had, the light in my apartment has been terrible, and I haven't been inclined or motivated to film my beautiful stash acquisitions under bad lighting. So hopefully in the next couple days we've got a little bit of a break in the clouds, and we'll see that video come out soon, because I did buy a big pile of really exciting yarn that I want to share with you guys. I do have one purchase this week that I do want to just show off here, and that is I picked up a copy of The Yarn Whisperer, and this is Clara Park's first book of essays. So you guys have probably all seen her Knitlandia book, which came out this year, floating around through podcasts and through Instagram. But this was her first book of essays, and I wanted to read it first. So I'm a couple essays in and seriously enjoying it. And maybe by next week I will have a little bit of a review of The Yarn Whisperer for you guys. So that's all for now. Again, I'm sorry about the change in format and that things were a little bit more scatterbrained this week. I didn't put together notes. the next 2 weeks are my last 2 weeks at work, and I'm really pushing myself hard there to get as much done as I can before I go on my leave. So I just, I needed to pull out the extra energy to film the podcast today, and I'm really glad that I did, because I love sharing the knitting projects with you guys. I love the feedback, and I love the drive that it keeps, that it gives me to keep on knitting. So hopefully next week things will be a bit more exciting around here. Thanks for sticking with me to the end, and happy knitting, happy crocheting, happy spinning, happy experimenting with fiber, because this is of course the Yarn Lab. Thanks guys.